Anyway, to start off, we got ourselves a series, eh?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to give myself a little bit of credit here and pat myself on the back because
Uh-huh. Go
they
ahead. Go
got
right ahead.
they
Uh-huh.
got smoked in game 2, 7-0,
Right.
and I didn't waver for a second that I thought Tampa was going to win the series.
Well,
And that's
no.
not to say that just because they won game 3 that they're going to win. They could lose in 5.
We talked about this Saturday. Colorado's just a better team than what they've faced in previous finals.
But and that is true. That's 100% true. And I remember, Colorado goes up 2-0, and I see a bunch of people being like, yeah, like I mentioned, like, hey, like they just overcame a 2-0 deficit last series, and people were like, well, this isn't the Rangers. Well, yeah, but you know what? At the same token, these aren't the Predators.
Right,
These aren't the
exactly.
Blues. These aren't the Oilers. So, like, it works both ways. These are
Yeah.
both two really good teams. We've got a really good cup final in our hand. Now, granted, it sucked that 2 of the games so far have been blowouts. One of them was a great game, which was game 1. Hopefully, we see more of that. But
Well,
but I'm
we've
not
got
backing down. Even if they lose game 4, I believe Tampa's going to win this in 7. You know, I'm never going to lose faith in that team until they are 110% officially
until
eliminated.
they're out. Yeah. Um,
I'm never going to count them out.
I mean, someone that is out more or less. Couple of key guys for Tampa actually. Because
Yes,
Kucherov's now doubtful for Game 4, and Point's also doubtful.
I doubt. It's okay. I doubt.
Uh-huh.
I don't think Point's going to play game 4. I think Kucherov will.
I mean, we'll see. There's only one way to
I
find
really
out.
don't think that both those guys are missing game 4.
It's crazy how we have back-to-back blowouts, though, and now you're like, Tampa has that depth. We've seen it.
Mm-hmm. And this is what Tampa does. We talked about this last series. This is what dominance is. It's not going out and beating teams, 6-2 like they just did every given night. No,
Mm-hmm.
it's losing 2 straight games, and it doesn't matter. We got this.
It just
They just they don't waver. They really don't. They find ways to win, and no matter what the circumstance is, they find a way
mm-hmm.
when it matters most, and that's ultimately they're the best team in the league at that. They're the best team in the league at a lot of things.
I'm
But that's the one that they're better than anybody in the league at.
they're the best team in the league, like at so many things since a certain little birdie did something.
Yeah, I'll say the interesting thing here, and this is the edge that Tampa has over Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
is just in terms of media perception. And what I mean by that is Andrei Vasilevsky gets lit up
Mm-hmm.
in game 2.
Right.
Wasn't It wasn't bad, but he wasn't great in game 1.
So many fans were calling for Brian Elliott, and that concerned the hell out of me.
I didn't see anybody.
I mean, I didn't like the way that people were reacting.
My point is that people weren't reacting that way. I didn't see a single soul saying you should start Brian Elliott for game 3.
I saw a few that were at least like maybe try Elliott.
Those are either trolls or the biggest idiots on the planet. I mean, the difference between the two teams is Andrei Vasilevsky gets lit up in game 2, and there's no doubt about it who's starting game 3. It was never going to be Brian Elliott. And last night we see Kemper get lit up.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation today is, does he start game 4?
Right. There, I did see that today.
And I think that there's actually legitimate argument towards both sides. I think there's an argument for starting Kemper. I think there's an argument for starting Francouz.
Well, yeah. I mean, look at how they've both performed through this run. Pavel's been perfect record-wise.
Record-wise, yeah. Both guys give you a chance to win on just about any given night, I think. But the edge that Tampa's had all series long, even though he hasn't been great this series so far, has been that Vassy's your guy. And just about any series you play in, you're going to have the edge goaltending wise. The only one that I've seen them in the last few years not have an edge goaltending wise was maybe the Rangers series, but they still won it because they're so much better than the Rangers in a lot of different areas.
I mean, unless Vasi gets hurt and
yeah, well, and if Vasi gets hurt, you're kind of fucked. Like, and that's nothing against Brian Elliott, but the guy's 37, 38 years old.
Yeah.
And it's
Back
just
it's
such a steep drop off. And it's not to say that you can't win games with Brian Elliott. Brian Elliott's won a lot of games in the National Hockey League.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the drop off of arguably best goalie, if not definite top 2 goaltender, to solid backup.
Solid backup who's on the back 9 of his career, who honestly hasn't had. What was his most recent decent season? Was it not like just a couple of years ago where it was like a first time with a 915 in at least 3-4 years? It was like his first season above 910 since he was like in Philly. Or no, wait, since he was in St. Louis.
I'd have to look that up. I'll look it up right now for you just to give you the stats, but it's interesting because
he's really like, there are guys that really
long time. He's been in this league since 2007.
Yeah.
He's had a pretty good career, but looking back at save percentage,
his St. Louis heyday was something else.
So yeah, he had a 940 save percentage, 11-12, which was they hit Halak one.
Right, yeah.
The
Halak year.
You've also got he had a 930 his last season in St. Louis before signing in Calgary. He had a 910 there, was pretty solid, but he had the rough playoffs, so they were like, nope, that's it, we're done.
Okay.
Goes to Philly, 909, 907, 899. 889, 912.
Ooh, yeah.
912 this past season was pretty solid, but then again, he played.
But that was his first season above a 910 since St. Louis.
And he started 17 games, and he played in 19. So like, it's a small sample size. So yeah, he's a backup. That's what he is. He was a really good goalie in his prime. He's a backup now. There's nothing wrong with Brian Elliott. It's just that it's hard to go from Andrei Vasilevsky to any backup goaltender. It's hard to go from Andrei Vasilevsky to any starter in the league.
Honestly, unless you're Igor Shesterkin, yeah.
Yeah.
There's
name
no
a good goalie. It's a drop off from Andrei Vasilevsky.
There's no other comparable than literally the Eastern Conference Final was the best we've seen.
Yeah, take Darcy Kemper for example. I think Darcy Kemper's a pretty damn good goalie.
Darcy's definitely still a step down from either of those two.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. And that's not a knock on Darcy Kemper. It's just how good they are.
It's just these guys are literal aliens.
So that's a situation right now, and I think that's maybe a discussion we should have. What would, if you're Jared Bednar today, what would you do with that? Do you go back to Kemper or do you go to Francouz?
I think if I'm Bedsy, which you got to keep in mind that we had this guy in our system for a long time too.
Yeah, let me tell you, if they had just been able to get through the 15-16 season with Todd Richards, if they didn't fire him at the beginning for going 0-8, they probably would have just let Richards walk, and he probably would have been promoted.
Bednar, yeah.
But obviously they needed to make the immediate change, and they went with Torts, which was a good decision on their end.
Oh yeah,
all things considered. But
okay, to really answer your question, if I'm Bednar, I'm making that a game time decision because I really don't know.
Yeah, I would make it. You're definitely making a game time decision because you don't want to give away. You want to show your hand beforehand. You want to give them a little bit of keep them on the edge a little bit about, are we facing Francouz? Are we facing Kemper?
Well, you also got to remember that I'm not an NHL coach. I don't think that far ahead with this kind of thing. I know the game's only like tomorrow and there's time and whatever. I don't see where you can go wrong because the way that the team in front of them plays doesn't really matter who you put in there, you're going to get a solid
Okay.
performance.
There's two reasons I'm going with who I would go with. I'd go with Kemper.
Okay.
And the reason I'd go with Kemper is you traded a lot of assets to get this guy.
Yeah, right.
High-end assets to get this guy. You brought him in for this purpose. He played well. He played pretty damn good in the first 2 games. I'm not sure I would let one bad game define, and not to mention,
right,
the goals. Tampa just ate them up in front of the net. I mean, Stamkos wide open in the slot, Cirelli driving hard to the net, Maroon driving hard to the net. Not a lot of support from the Colorado. And the Palat goal was completely inexcusable. They were coming in 2-on-3, and it's Stamkos was the last guy coming in. And Mika Rin is a hell of a player, but I don't know what the fuck he was doing on that goal.
You cannot hang this loss in net at all.
Yeah, that's not a game I would hold on a goaltender for losing. So I would go back to Kemper and part of the reason is you're up 2-1 in the series. This is not a situation you lose game 4, it's dire, you're fucked. You're down 3-1. No, if you lose, sucks, but you still, it's a best of 3 now, and you got home ice.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? So I would go with Kemper, and if it doesn't work out, if Kemper has a bad game, then you can make the switch to Francouz. It's hard to make this switch to Francouz now because if he plays bad in game 4, it's hard to go back to Kemper at that point.
Right.
The second reason, and this is, I'm not going to credit myself for this point. This is one that Kipper brought up when I was listening today that I think is incredibly interesting. Is it's hard to convince a guy like Darcy Kemper to come back if you make this switch.
Yeah, we never really talk about the mental side of the game for a goalie, do we?
Mental it's just as important as anything physical. It really is. You look at a guy like Patrick Waugh, maybe the most mentally tough goaltender of all time.
And the infamous trade game just broke him down.
Yeah. That was maybe the only blip he had in his career as far as bad mental toughness game. He's usually good at bouncing back. But, what did he do that was great athletically? He wasn't a super athletic guy. His game was positioning. It was positioning.
I think his biggest. I actually have an answer for you for that question.
What?
I think his biggest athletic feat, his pirouette around Wayne Gretzky.
I would agree with that. Yeah, his stick handling ability might be the most athletic thing he could do.
With John Davidson on the call.
Yeah, which is amazing.
That's so legendary. I love it.
It is. It's one of the greatest videos ever. But he's a bigger guy.
Listening to Jay.
Entire game on positioning, and he was right, and that's why he was so great. It's not like he's this ungodly athletic Dominic Hasek kind of goaltender. Hasek had some of the worst positioning you'd ever see from a goalie at all. And it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter.
He would windmill through the net and be fine.
Yeah, he would do the most ridiculous kick you've ever seen in his life, and for some reason, he would hit the puck. That's not who Patrick Roy was. So
Henrik was like that for a while.
Yeah.
Henrik was like that for a while. There are a lot of guys that really just ended up having a good mix of both.
I think Igor's a little bit like that, don't you? Igor's not the most athletic guy. I think his biggest attribute is again, he's really big and his positioning is excellent.
Well, that's why we come back to comparing Igor and Vasilevsky so much.
And that's the edge I give to Vasilevsky is he's really athletic.
They play such a similar way. And yes, Vasi's really athletic. Like this guy's groin is made out of rubber. But
he does things goalies shouldn't be allowed to do.
No, and yet his positioning is always on par, always on point.
It's very rarely off.
So if you want to pick one or the other in terms of athleticism versus positioning, Igor's edge is obviously his positioning, but Vasi does have both.
Yes. And I think
Kemper's great. Kemper's a great athlete. His positioning can be off a lot. Franco's
Franco's positioning is athleticism is pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that
you know what it is with Franco's? It's his decision making.
I would say that in his reflexes. His reflexes aren't the quickest either. You could beat him glove side. You can beat him blocker side. Like, it's not like he's out of position often or not athletic. It's just, you know, as far as like moving laterally, I'd say that's more of a you can pick your spot on him kind of situation. But like I said, there's a reason that you can go with either guy, and it's not a situation where I think you can necessarily go wrong.
Puck playing, decision making is always a thing.
This is let me clarify this. I don't think you can go wrong in terms of. I think both guys are relatively on an even level as far as talent's concerned. Mm-hmm. Where you can go wrong is the mental side of it. I think the mental side of it is why you got to go with Kemper, because Kemper has left games and series for the Avalanche this playoffs solely due to injury. This would be the first time he left a game or if they just go with Francouz the rest of the way, a series due to performance. And I just don't feel right about that. I know that the eye thing might still be lingering. If that's their rationale, if they think that it's starting to affect him again, then I would make the move. But if it's not that big of a deal, and this is just he had one bad game and we're making the switch, I think that's a bad call.
Yeah. Okay, that's totally fair. There were a little bit more controversies going around with Game 3 too. Like there's a lot of shenanigans that happened like towards the end. Game two had Corey Perry doing Corey Perry things.
Yeah.
And Game 3 just had a little bit of everything from everybody. Apparently there's no suspension coming to Taves, which it's fine.
It's the Stanley Cup final. I doubt that any suspensions were coming.
Yeah, we're close enough to the end anyway, to the point where unless it's super egregious, like whatever Scheifele did to Evans last year.
When you, if it's super egregious, then you do it. But if it's like kind of borderline and like something you'd maybe suspend in the regular season, I've always been perfectly okay with the league saying, hey, this incident happened in Game 3 of the Stanley Cup final. We're suspending this player for 2 games in next year's regular season to start. We're not going to do
carrying things over. And
I think that that's the smarter way to do it. I generally speaking, from like the third round on, I think that's the best way to go about it. Unless, of course, like you said, it's super fucking egregious, like a Mark Scheifele hit on Jake Evans or a Raffi Torres hit, something like that. Like, that's generally speaking how I would handle it. But in this case, I really don't. There's a lot going on both ends. I think they kind of settled it out on the ice themselves. Just move on to Game 4.
Yeah, a lot of the depth guys showed up in Game 3, but not much else. You know, which I mean, it's nice to see that the depth is still stepping up and doing what it needs to do, but there needs to be more. Just you need more. Cogliano looked great.
Yeah, he was really, really mixing things up there, which Colorado needs a little bit. You know, Colorado's got some guys on it who can be those big physical presence. You know, I don't think he makes a difference in terms of the outcome of the game, win or lose. Do you know who they needed last night? They needed Kadri.
They did need Nas.
They needed Kadri, especially towards the end of that game.
That
I can't even express how big of a loss.
Well, Nas, it's funny because like you look at Tampa, you look at the construction of these teams, they're fairly similar. But at the same time, you don't have Tampa has Patrick Maroon, they have Corey Perry, they have, you know, guys, they have Kucherov
is more than willing to
underratedly greasy and
you know? Stamkos did it. We saw in the last round against Alexei Lafreniere.
They have guys that'll come in and mix it up, but in terms of for what they're known for in terms of doing that, I think the biggest name that Colorado really has in that department is Josh Manson.
I would say so as well. And I think that that's another edge that Tampa has is because
Cogs can do it. Nas can do it when he's healthy. We know this. JJ's maybe.
The problem with their situation is in the Stanley Cup final, you can really ill afford to have any of your defensemen go off the ice for something like that. You need these guys prepared to play their shifts. Like if there's a fight, I don't want my defensemen in the Stanley Cup fight. We only got 6 of them. That means we're gonna have to roll 5 defensemen for the next like 5+ minutes.
Mm-hmm. And that's
so it's hard. You can't really have Manson or Jack Johnson doing it. You need some of the forwards to step in and do it. It's a good thing Cogliano does it. The difference though is I think that McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen they're not soft players. They're willing to kind of stand up for themselves. This is where you really need Kadri, man. This is where you really need them.
Yeah, exactly. Because we know Nathan can do that. We know Nathan can step up in that way if he absolutely has to.
Yes.
But you do not want Nathan McKinnon going into the penalty box for something.
Yeah. Like you don't want him to have to stand up for himself a lot.
You can afford that with a Nazem Kadri, even though like we know how skilled Nas is. Mm-hmm. We know how much he can chip in on any aspect of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I would much rather have Nas in the box for a situation like that than a Nate McKinnon.
Absolutely.
You just don't want Nas out of the game.
Yeah. And give him credit. He's been fantastic in these playoffs with that.
He's been so much better this playoff than any of the previous runs he's been on. And I mean, he's been just playing his skill game, right? He's been able to play his skill game and calm down.
Yeah. Because I think people sometimes forget he's a really fucking good player.
He's such a great player. And
I'm going to be honest with you.
It's like, again, we talk about his history, right?
Yeah.
The first 2 suspensions were temper tantrums. The third one was just a bad hit.
Yeah.
He's kept his cool when he's been in the lineup.
There are some players in the National Hockey League who are centers who are really, really talented that aren't necessarily 1Cs. You know what I mean? They're not a number 1 center.
Right.
I've thrown Ryan Johansson into that category. I've thrown Mark Scheifele into that category.
Mm-hmm.
Because he doesn't play any fucking defense.
Right.
There's some really good players who I think are really, really good, but they're not number 1 centers. I think Nazem Kadri is. He's not a number 1 center on the Avalanche for obvious reasons.
He could be a number 1 center on most teams.
On most teams. I think he could go to a lot of different teams and be a number 1 center. He's absolutely got the makeup for it. He's got a great shot. He can create offense on his own. He's a great passer. And he drives hard. He's hard-nosed. He's a pain in the ass to play. He's absolutely a number 1 center in the National Hockey League.
You know where that would be a decent fit? Dallas.
You know, there was an interesting team brought up for him today.
Was there?
If Nick Backstrom is done.
Right. Oh my God.
TIR. I think Washington makes perfect sense.
That would be Nas and Ovi together. Ooh. Yes. Oh my God. Did we not listen? We said this in a show before.
And I was just kind of joking around. Now that might actually be a realistic possibility.
Oh my God. It's just trade Marshy over there and you're set. Don Sweeney would do it too.
That's an interesting circumstance we're to talk about in a later episode is what's going to happen with Pasternak. I'm interested to see what happens.
Yeah, but Anyway, I guess
I'm
to
happy
wrap
for
up,
Kadri. He's gonna get paid this off season, and it's
yeah,
gonna be fucking sweet.
I just want to see him play. I just want to see him finish this cup.
Mm-hmm.
You know, win or lose, I just want to see Nas finish. Right? I just want to see him in the lineup.
Yeah.